Hi everyone, I'm Trent Kusters from League of Geeks, and this is the Game Maker's Notebook. Well, you know you're destined for video games when you get scooped out of national military service by EA to work for them. And that's how my chat with Raphaël Colantonio, creative director and president of WolfEye Studios, started. We, of course, went on to talk about the other studio that he founded, Arcane Studios, and their creative, critical, cultural, commercial success with Dishonored, Prey, and the other games that they worked on. We spoke about their acquisition and what it takes to leave a studio 18 years after you founded it. And then we speak about his new studio, WolfEye Studios, and their game Weird West, which I've been playing a bunch of lately. We spoke about creative decisions and production decisions around taking their experience with immersive sim to a smaller scope and a new viewpoint. We speak about their experience with Devolver, the game's publisher. We spoke about accessibility and challenge and balancing that in immersive sims and how they approach that, and wins and near successes that Ralph felt they had for their game and what they had hoped for it. And of course, we speak about what's up next, what's coming for them, and we wrapped up talking a little bit about Raf's band. Raf is an incredibly experienced developer who's had a lot of time on various different elements of the industry, and I really hope that you enjoy this chat. It was an absolute pleasure to get the time to talk to him. Please enjoy.
You heard the song, old friend? No, I ain't gonna sing it. Go, kill the man outside Grackle. Dead on the plain. But he wasn't a man. And he sure wasn't slain. Now, a shadow follows me. A menace on the wind. Lurks there in my dreams. Sure he killed me in the end. But I've got promises to keep before I'm laid to rest. My irons, they hunt shadows, 'cause I was born in the weird west. Mighty brave coming out here, old friend. Brave. Or foolish.
Hey, Raf, thanks for joining us here today.
Thanks for inviting.
No problem whatsoever. It's a real pleasure. Everyone, we have the president and creative director, Raphaël Colantonio of WolfEye Games with us here today. And I've been playing Raf and his team's game, Weird West. It's really got its claws into me. But Raf also, for those of you who don't know, has quite a storied history in games and a really interesting path, not to mention founding an incredibly successful studio, critically, culturally, commercially, Arcane Studios. So, Raf, why don't we, as we sort of always do in this podcast, why don't we take it all the way back into the beginning? Because you've got quite an interesting story about how you actually got into games yourself individually as well. So why don't you just walk us through how you got into games and ended up at Arcane Studios?
Yeah, it was indeed an interesting story because I was not really planning to. I was a huge fan of games, and I was dreaming of working for games, but there was no back then when I was in my 20s. So we're talking in '93. Mm-hmm. There was no roadmap for. No obvious roadmap. There was no school specific to video games. The industry was more like back then. I mean, there was an industry because big companies like EA existed or Activision, but it's not like there was a school or specialty for it. Like it was hard to understand how these people ended up working in games, right? So, and back then I was doing the military service, and I was going to. My school was over, and I was going to be an engineer or some sort. in an office, and a friend of mine bought this magazine, and it asked me, "Hey, look, there is a trip to win to Texas to play test a game called Ultima 8, and since Ultima is your favorite game of all time, it would be nice if you would, file this competition." And they were like maybe 10 questions about the Ultima franchise. I was like, "Look, I'm doing the military service, which was mandatory back then in France, and there is zero chance that I'm going to win anything. And two, even if I win, there's zero chance they're going to make me go to Texas to play test the game." I said, "Well, I'll just do it just in case." So I did it. And as you can tell, by the way, by my accent, I was in France back then, French person. And so I did this competition, and then I got a phone call from home one night, and it was EA, the owners of Origin and the Ultima franchise. And so I was talking to this woman, and she was telling me that I did not really win a trip to Texas because that was like a fake kind of like a contest to find. Yeah, so weird, cool. Right? Illegal, right? Because they were looking for an employee that was a gamer, that was articulate enough to join Electronic Arts France as seventh employee.
Wow!
Back then, as they were starting the office in France, so they were expanding, and they were looking for a gamer / IT / customer support, localization, etc., etc. I was like, you bet. And they did the impossible. They took me off of the army, which is super hard. I mean, you anything government based, you can imagine how hard it is.
Yeah.
But they took me out of the army because I did the interview. Apparently, I interviewed well enough that they really wanted me.
Yeah, it seems that way. If they're going toe to toe with the government, right?
Exactly. And the colonel was very, very nice and collaborative, and he made it happen with the ministry and all that. And I went from one day I was at the army wearing the suit every day to the next day I was at EA playing games.
In your hoodie, yeah.
That's pretty much how it happened.
Isn't it interesting how just sometimes in our lives, singular people can, be the ones that sort of open the gate, or, like this colonel could have easily had a bad day that day and, not been as collaborative, and you'd be doing your engineering desk job or pushing papers for the military or something.
Hey, in the multiverse, there's probably a version of me that is still stuck in the military there.
So amazing. So you and it sounded like quite a support role at EA for that seventh employee. So localization, all the critical stuff, but not right on the tools immediately. It sounds like. So how did you go about working your way up onto the tools, or shifting left or right, jumping into different roles there?
Yeah, so quickly I realized that there was no way for me to do development in France, because the EA in France was mostly sales and marketing office.
Okay, right.
Yeah, so I was more like assisting the sales force with the IT problems, and like I was helping with translation, etc. And while it was fun to be in that environment, it was also frustrating to know that somewhere else in the world, like England or America, that's where the real fun happened, and you make games. And like, again, I had no idea how to make games. So
it's almost worse being closer, like, than if you were just in the military, right?
Yeah, it's a total tease. But and it was kind of the joke at the office, because everybody knew that I wanted to meet the big boys, So, but eventually I did, because like occasionally I would go to England to test a game for translation reason. I would test it closer to the devs. So I would go to EA England, which was close to London, and stay there for a week. So I started to befriend some of the people there, and just like life does its thing, connections, and make yourself as helpful as possible, and show that you're motivated and that you really would like to learn something, so that whatever the price, whatever the salary is, doesn't matter if it's for free. I will do it. I don't care. It's so fun. Please, please, please. And I was this kind of annoying kid, but at the same time, I had a lot of energy, had a lot of passion, and I think people could feel that. And so they moved me to England for a couple of years, where I could learn more about production. I was like an assistant producer.
Oh, awesome! And, what a great internship! That's fantastic.
Yeah, and it was paid. It was more like it was an official role. It was still like tiny, because in the hierarchy of a company like EA, when you're an assistant producer, there's another 20 grades before you.
Assistant producer 2, assistant producer 3.
Totally. Yeah. And then he goes to associate, and then he goes to it was another form of army, really.
You just don't get the cool like lapels and insignias as well.
Exactly.
Great. And so you're in production, and you're and what was happening at that studio? What sort of games were you working? Was it sports games over in London, or?
Yeah, in London. It's close to London. It's not exactly London. Now it's Guildford, but back then it was Langley. They were doing a variety of things. There was also the Bullfrog stuff.
Yeah, I was wondering if they were EA at the time as well. Yeah,
totally, yeah. And so Bullfrog was the exciting part for me. Whereas EA Sports, not so much. I've never been that much into sports games and consoles. I was more like a PC RPG guy. So yeah, I worked there. I helped in design a few games, and that was great. But soon enough, I got frustrated again that EA was more like into console games and stuff that I was not that much into. And
you're closer again, but not close enough. Still, right?
I was not close enough to Origin in Texas to make Ultima, right? So those were really the games I wanted to work on. That kind of games, anyway. Mm-hmm. So and funnily enough, this is where Austin comes into play, because I live in Austin now. Mm-hmm. Back then, I went to Texas, to Austin, for a vacation. So I paid on my own dime, meeting with the Origin folks, the people who were doing Ultima. So the boss of Origin was called Richard Garriott. Is a very important figure in my development of video game passion.
Was that organized did you just do that of your own accord and take your own initiative, or did you do that through EA networks and things?
Not at all. No, I was on my own. I emailed him first, of course, and I said, "Hey, which back then sending an email was a big deal.
Right.
Sending an email internally through
through assistant 2 and 3 and 4, right? It's got to go up the chain.
Yeah, and I was like, "Hey, I work in Europe, and we had met before at shows and stuff, so he knew I was a fan." I was like, "Hey, I'm finally coming to Austin for vacation." So I went there, met him, and he gave me a job for Ultima Online 2.
That's awesome.
Ultima Online 2, which was never made. And in fact, I never had the job, because what happened is while I signed the contract on my end for a role of producer, game designer kind of thing.
Yeah.
They never returned the contract to me after 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and I was wondering what happened. And what happened was that EA just closed Origin. And that he didn't know at the moment of the interview. So it left some really, really painful thoughts, because back then I'm 20 something, like 25 or whatever, 27. I can't remember how old I was when I got this. 25, I think.
Yeah.
It was the most important thing in my life. It was.
Of course. Everything's been building to this moment, all right? You're getting closer and closer, and then Lord Garriott gives you a job.
Yeah, I'm going to move with God himself and work on games with him. It was just like the best thing ever that could happen to me. And then it doesn't, because EA is in the way or whatever, And of course you see everything in dark back then. So I left EA, actually. I was so frustrated, and made my own company, Arcane Studios. Before that, I spent 2 years in a company where I met some of the people that would then join me in my venture with Arcane. But anyway, yeah, I started Arcane, and then I was determined to make RPGs, PC RPGs. I don't care if EA said they don't sell. I just that's what I'm going to do. And I found a bunch of people that was just as naive as I was, and who didn't care about money, but just wanted to see that same game as I wanted. And they helped me making this happen. And there we are, 20 something years later. Arcane was, Arcane has become what it's become. I've left since then. I'm friend with Richard, actually, not as a fan or colleague or anything. It's just a person that we appreciate each other.
Mm-hmm.
And I've worked with most of my heroes. Harvey Smith, who was Deus Ex. I've worked with Doug Church, who was Thief, and
these are all ex-Looking Glass crew as well, right? Yeah. Was Harvey at Looking Glass as well, or Iron Storm?
Harvey was at Looking Glass, not exactly. He was at Origin when Origin was publishing Looking Glass.
Yes. So, okay. Gotcha.
Yeah, we're talking like some really old talks right now, like for old people.
This immersive sim crew, right?
This doesn't mean anything now to the modern gamers, but it's kind of like it's prehistoric, but it's still historic in a way. So it's interesting to see how things become what they become. Like why we make the games we do today is all because of the passion for a specific type of companies and games we had when we were kids.
Even things like the way, although, like you say, some folks who pick up a game these days, and are just, let's say they're, of the younger generation and they're just getting into it, and they may not know, have even heard of things like, Thief or Deus Ex or these, these games, or Ultima, these games that some of these folks that we're talking about built their craft on and were so seminal at their time. Even things, how we even interact with an object in contemporary games these days have so much to pay to some of these games that were some of the first to do it, and do it in a way that was meaningful to your experience in the game. Yeah. It's amazing to think what's come of and also like studios like, why am I blanking? Or Irrational, things like that, and BioShock, like the crew that, the big games, obviously not to mention Arcane Studios. And so for those who are listening, Arcane Studios, no doubt many of you know of Arcane Studios, but Arcane Studios, Arx Fatalis, Dishonored, Prey, most recently Deathloop. There's a lot of stuff coming out of that studio. So let's jump back to Arcane for a second. So what was the first game? And before we dive into that question, actually, did any of you have any professional experience in the genre that you were diving into, like RPGs, or were you all it was just you'd made some games, you'd worked on games before, but now you wanted to make the games that you'd been playing, not necessarily making?
Yeah, no, frankly, it was a very desperate and a stupid move in a sense that I think that shows how wishful thinking and naivety and hard work can work.
It's an amazingly potent mix, isn't it? Sometimes
it's an incredible potent mix, which will make you do miracles. Because in retrospect, and everybody was warning me. They were looking at me like, "Ha, seriously?" And I would have said that too, knowing what I know now. Yeah. Right? But back then, I was not having it. I was like, "Fuck you guys." Sorry for the. I was like, "No way, guys! I'm gonna make it."
Yeah.
And the cool thing was that I also. And that's how it works. I mean, you're 20-something. If you start a new company, you're not going to get the top-notch programmers that are already established. You're going to get whoever is actually crazy enough to follow you. So back then, that's what I had. I had a bunch of people that were in the same dream. And hopefully they were good enough to make it happen too. But it could have gone worse. And we started totally understaffed, under budget. Doing a type of game that I had never worked on. And even the games that I worked on before, I barely knew how to make a game. I mean, I had a little bit of experience, but not that much experience.
Yeah.
And we were going to do our own engine, develop our own script system, etc. out of the blue, which was crazy. It was, and doing a PC game, which was the smallest shrinking market back then, and doing an RPG, which is one of the hardest type of games to make.
Yeah. What year was Arkane founded? Just to timestamp us right now. 99, yeah.
99.
Yeah, there was kind of the height of everyone freaking out about PC, right? And what it was doing.
On one hand, it was the moment where the consoles were becoming big, because I believe that's when PS1, PS2, I think the PS1 was transitioning into the PS2 back then.
Yeah.
In 2002 when we shipped our game, and Morrowind shipped their game at the same time. They also shipped on Xbox.
That's big news on Xbox.
Yeah, it was just a very, very desperate move, and it's in many, many ways it's unbelievable that we did how. We went as far as we did, and at every gate, at every stage, signing our first publisher, then it's already like a miracle. And our publisher dies, and then having another publisher, which is, God, like at least we can ship something. And then this publisher dies again. It's incredible. And then eventually the game ships, and the game doesn't make any sales. Like it's literally close to zero, like barely any money. We don't see any money back because all the publishers before us somehow had the money. Even though it was not an expensive game. And then, we signed another publisher in spite of having nothing in our hands to prove. And et cetera, et cetera. And so we've been, it's been a hard road.
Yeah.
Very fascinating as well, but it did require the attention, the energy, and the faith of, a million men to be able to do that. And we did it somehow. All the men and women of Arkane have gone really, really way further than we thought we would ever have. We bootstrapped. It's not like it's not like we were backed up by funds or something. And no experience, not much money, just some crazy amount of belief in miracles.
Yeah, it's amazing thing. Like I think back on, when we were setting up League of Geeks, our studio, and making this game, Mello, and just that, like we, and I'd already been making games for 5 years, shipped a bunch of titles at that point in time. I was working at a big third party studio that was just pumping them out, so we knew how to make a game. But man, it's the naivety that we walked into that whole scenario with, and it wasn't even arrogance. It was like straight up naivety. Like we had no idea what we were signing ourselves up for. But I think, and when you've got that burning optimism and that confidence and that thing that you want, like, making that game that little Raph wanted to play, right? It's just every problem that comes before you, you just get it out of the way because it's in the way of that ultimate goal. And all that naivety, although it presents problems along the way because you had no idea they were coming down the road, it puts you on a journey and a path, I think, that, like, I don't know if I would have tried to attempt what we did setting up League of Geeks now, knowing what I know. It was almost, it was only possible because I didn't know those things. I didn't know what was ahead of us.
Of course, and I assume any huge achievement, whether it's a breakthrough in science or whether it's a film or that someone had never done before, whatever it is, I'm sure it's probably the only way to do it. Because once you know how hard everything is, then you start to make it safe. You start to and whereas if you don't know, you're gonna try those crazy bets, and you're gonna hurt yourself left and right, and you're gonna go into mode, right? Because it goes up and down, of course. Like on one hand, there is all this optimism and this naivety that serves the game, the project. But on the other hand, every time things become too hard, where you realize maybe you don't have the right engine, or like things that are like so fundamental, and now like everybody's panicking, and it's so hard, and you feel so lonely. It's like, I think I called on myself. I will never solve this problem, and you find yourself in truly unsolvable problem. I remember during Arx, and of course, memory does its thing where you kind of like forget the bad, right? And just
of course,
you remember the good. But if you really think about it, all the games I've worked on was so hard to make. There was always like a few moments where everybody is like thinking, I think we're going towards a wall right now,
Yeah,
And
that trough of disillusionment in the middle of games, where it's just, no matter if you're the game director or you're, the head of QA or you're a producer or whoever, like there's that middle part of games where no one knows if it's going to come together, right? Or you're looking at it and you're like, how is this thing going to happen? It's actually only the faith of having been in that place and come out of it before that will see you through it.
That's true, but if you've never been through it more times,
yeah, that's scary.
Is running at, I remember when in beta, Arx Fatalis was taking about 20 minutes to load a level, and it was running at an average frame rate of 6 frames a second on the best PCs. And we're like, it's just like, how, it's impossible,
Yeah,
and
what
then,
do we do?
My programmer is checking like some documentation about portals and stuff and BSPs and all that, and he's like, I think I can do something. And in a matter of like maybe a week or two, he came back with putting that technology in that he had been refusing to even try for years. And then I was spending all my nights, weekends, portalizing the entire game by hand myself. Back then I was working on animations, I was working on script, and I was like trying to find the crashes. I would run the game in MS Dev and as a studio, and wait for a crash, and then learn how to replicate it, and then track it until the line that I knew the programmers wanted to see, and then I would call the program. I was like the assistant of everybody. And the director of the game at the same time.
Yeah.
And that's also where I and Julien Roby bonded so much from a development standpoint. And because he was my intern back then, he was like this younger developer than I was, like 10 years younger, and he really wanted to work on that game. So he got in. And now we WolfEye is, we are both founders of this company.
Oh, wonderful! Okay, that's fantastic.
Yeah, so it's going through hell together. That's but it's super. Life in retrospect, when we do these kind of things, like I don't think I'd do that now, but I can't even believe I did it, frankly.
So we're getting closer to WolfEye now. So Arx Fatalis was the first game, right, that you were talking about.
Right.
Yep. Okay. So you finally do the thing. It ships, and it's there are more frames per second than 6, right? It goes out there. What do you do as a studio that's got no money coming in, and how many people did you have at that point in time, Raph, on the books?
I believe when we shipped, we had 8 or 9 people.
Yep. Okay. And this was, and I imagine only in France at this point in time, or
yes.
Right? Yeah.
Well, even though I had started my how could you say, my conquest of America, because
the French have always had their eye on it. Let's be honest.
Yeah. I back then my game. I contacted a few of my heroes back then, and one of them was Doc Church, who was Looking Glass, and Paul Narath was CEO of Looking Glass, and so they saw the demo of Arx back then, and of course this was something that was in their DNA as well. And so the some of the writing and some of the voice recording was made by people in Boston who were actually former Looking Glass, because Looking Glass 2 had closed, by the way.
Yes, yeah.
So that's how I started to mingle with Looking Glass people.
Yep.
Voiceover people, writers, audio people. In fact,
cool.
One of the audio guys of Thief did some of the audio for Arx, and so that started a trend for us trying to collaborate more and more with American talents from games that we're big fans of.
Yep.
Which eventually paid off. It's a lot of networking and a lot of like sharing the same passion for the same games, and because at the end of the day, when people feel that, when they know that. It creates some sort of implicit communication where you don't have to re-explain why you want this thing, because of course, you're talking to the person who's done something that you're a fan of already. So
Yeah.
it's gonna probably be in the right tone.
Yes, totally. And so that next game, how do you go about? Did you know what you wanted to make straight off the back of Arx Fatalis? Did you have a publisher? I mean, two had already bit the dust while you're working with them. What's the playing field looking like?
Two were out, as nice as they were, and all the plans that we had made together, they were out. So at this point, we were without a publisher, without any money, and frankly, with a sequel of a game that did not sell in our hands.
Yep.
So that was not the best position to be in.
Mm-hmm.
And but the funny story is, even when we were trying to find money for Arx Fatalis, our first game, that's where the Bethesda story is funny. Bethesda is the company that eventually we sold to in 2010.
Mm-hmm.
But when we were doing Arx Fatalis, there was this guy called Todd Vaughn who saw the game at an ECTS in England. Saw the game, and he's a poker face guy, right? So saw the game. Give me 1 week, and we're about to go under before that small publisher signed us, and then before 1 week, we signed this German publisher. Yeah, and then Todd Vaughn emailed me. It's like, hey, can you still talk about Arx? And I said, sorry, we had to sign because we were going to go under, so we signed, and then no answer. It's a man of a few words.
Yeah.
And then when we were doing Arx 2, we were doing it this time because we were pretty good at making good friends. So then this time we were making it with the Source engine from Valve, and we were one of the very, very few developers to have access to it because it was before Half-Life 2 was released.
Yeah, okay, right.
So we had a kick-ass demo. Everybody was like, wow, this looks amazing.
Yeah.
Of course, Arx did not sell, so it did not help, but they really, really liked what they saw. And Ubisoft was going around us. They really wanted the game, and they wanted us to turn it into one of their own franchises, as opposed to Arx 2. They wanted a Mind Magic game with it.
Yep.
But Todd Vaughn, guy from Bethesda, saw it again at E3, saw this, and he looked, and I saw his eyes leaking up, and he was, give me 1 week. And but again, we're gonna go under, so we signed with Ubisoft, and then Todd Vaughn emails me, said, "Hey, do you still have this game?" And I said, "I'm sorry, we had to sign with Ubisoft." And then he doesn't reply. And that's pretty much what has happened game after game with the Bethesda thing until in 2009, I believe, we had to announce. We said, because we had, after a second failure, Arx was the first, I don't want to say failure, could call them near successes if you prefer, but they are...
I like that. Let's call them near successes.
Near successes, because they were good games. People recognize them as good games. They still, to this day, they put a mark in the gaming. People refer to them, etc.
Yep.
But they did not sell. They did not make us rich in any way. But they would take us to the next step, and the next after Arx and after Dark Messiah of Mind Magic. Then we started to do our own things, which again could not find a publisher or got killed on the way or whatever. And then at some point in 2008, we were like, well, I think we're going to have to close the shop. So we did an interview with Game Industry Biz, sorry. And where we just said, hey, we've been working for EA on a game called LMNO. They canceled the game, and then we're doing this, and they canceled the game, and then we're doing our own game, and that game doesn't find a publisher. Therefore, at this point, we're going to have to close the shop in a week or two or something. And Todd Vaughn, he comes back, and he says, hey, I want to tell you about something. And at this point, they wanted us to make some sort of a thief type of game. Yeah, right. Wow. And in the vein of Looking Glass, etc. And he had his eyes on us since 10 years before. That's so interesting that he came to, instead of coming along and looking at what you got, he saw the studio, saw what you were doing, saw the makeup, and then was like, Bethesda and Arcane, this type of game. Yeah, and
It's quite a fascinating approach.
The deal was made pretty quickly. We did not sell it.
You're like, no, that's not up our alley. Sorry, we're not interested.
Oh my god! No, it was like this is what's so funny about the type of adventure that this kind of companies will give you is that we were not like the company who wanted to do anything. We just wanted to do something very specific, and so we were one day about to lose our jobs, passion, friends, adventure altogether. 10 years of life. Oh my god, this is gone. So, and then the next day, I received a phone call from Todd Vaughn from Bethesda, who says, "Hey, we have the saviors here. We have money, and we want you to make exactly the type of game that you want." My God,
it's a little guardian angel. Yeah.
I was
amazing.
Like, I don't know. Yeah, let's see. Let me think. I was like, super. Yes, of course. And so, we made quickly a deal, and then they bought us maybe 6 months, a year into it. It was planned from the get-go, I assume. Like, we were so ready. We were so tired of struggling in business. We were the talented company that never had the right budget and the right marketing, etc. So Bethesda changed that. They said, okay, let us do what we do, and we'll let you do what you do, with no artistic, full artistic control on your end. We're not going to be, you're not going to be in your way. And it was great. It was a great relationship.
Did they provide any creative support to the development? Did they have rounds of notes or anything like that, even if it wasn't, requested or enforced or anything?
Yeah, and specifically Todd Vaughn, frankly, I think because he liked so much our kind of games. I think we were a little bit of his pet project, frankly.
Yeah, right, okay.
Because they were doing like a variety of things, but he really liked those immersive sims. And so he would give us a little more time, I think, than he was giving to the other studios. And when he would give us feedback, of course. Totally. And it was always like pretty soft. Like, it was not like, and that's what you have to do, right? Which is why I think it worked out for us.
Yep.
And it's funny because one of the first things that happened when we got bought by Bethesda was I got the story, that story I told you about every project when I would meet Todd Vaughn. Then I got that story told to me from the side of Bethesda by Todd Howard, the guy who did all the since Morrowind and Skyrim and all that. And he told me that story. He said, like, wow, remember
Todd Vaughn. You're a Todd Vaughn's one that got away for many years there. Yeah.
But here's the funny thing: is like when they were doing Oblivion, that's when we were doing Dark Messiah. So, and Todd Vaughn saw our combat system back then, which was probably, that we were more combat focused than Oblivion was doing much more, but like the combat itself, we were doing a little better. And more, it felt better. It felt more immersive, more physical, more, visceral. And so he said, like, wow, Todd Vaughn came back from E3 when he saw your game, and he said, guys, we are fucked. And they were not fucked at all, but it was funny. It was funny that he said that. So they always awesome. Internally, they always had like a lot of respect for Arkane. So that's why great. The deal when the context was right, it was a very, very easy marriage.
Yeah, totally. Okay, so that game, obviously, spoilers, was Dishonored, right? That went on to have resounding success. So I kind of want to skip a little bit of this part, but the points that I want to touch base on before we get to, towards wrapping up your time at Arkane and sort of how WolfEye came about is just like, tell me about those moments when Dishonored is released or it's coming up to launch, and was there a moment in time where you realized, this is the one? Like, this is the hockey stick moment where the studio, everything we've been working towards, that success is, and I mean, huge mainstream success for an immersive sim as well. That like, I don't know if there was one before it that had seen, especially because so many of them had come many years before games were as huge as they were, with consoles having just like massive penetration into households, and the demographics of gamers shifting and broadening massively. So what was that moment like for you? Can you pinpoint a moment where you're like, oh shit, it's happening?
And to your point about the success of immersive sims, it was a big win for us because we've always been journalists and immersive sim makers and some gamers. We've always been very sad in a way that the immersive sim has never been a big thing.
It's never been fully appreciated like you feel it should be, right?
Yeah. And then we have this finally this huge win, which was some sort of a revenge on every publisher that damn at us. But and especially because we were unleashed, we did exactly the game we wanted to make, as weird and crazy as we wanted it to be. And but I think the moment where I and Harvey realized what was happening was at E3, the year we shipped the game, because we started to see. When I remember when we were back from the airport in San Francisco to fly back to Austin, and we were wearing a T-shirt, Dishonored T-shirt, and for the first time, I'm always wearing T-shirts of my games, at E3 or stuff, but for the first time, you would have people on the way to the airport or at the airport saying, "Oh yeah, I saw this game; it's really great. I'm waiting for it," and we're like, "Wow, I think this time we got something," because the journalist part, I never trust that. Journalists are always excited about our games. And it's their job. They have to be excited, And if your game is half decent, they're going to be excited. But when people in the streets start to tell you that, and then I saw those huge, giant billboards in New York and in LA painting, murals of Dishonored and stuff, and we're like, wow. And then we saw what was happening. So it was very, very satisfying for sure, because frankly, it's recognition for a genre that has been not that well known, I think. And there's been fantastic games in that vein, like Thief. The first Thief was incredible, but it did not hit the mark somehow, on the commercial side anyway.
So Dishonored 2, Prey, and then we're coming to the end of your tenure at Arcane Studios. So I know you've spoken about this before a number of times, but for our listeners, how do you reach a point, or when do you know it's time to sort of by this time, you've had the studio 20 years, Raph, or something like that? And when do you get those feelings? And did you have your eye on another studio, or was it a big life shift? Or obviously you'd already sold to Bethesda,
So it was exactly 18 years, in fact, when I left the company. And I remember, because that was part of the speech I gave to the company, as now that they're an adult, they can do their
they're of legal drinking age and driving age.
Yeah, it was symbolically interesting. But I think it's there was a set of reasons. It was not one thing that if that one thing was not true, then I would have stayed or something. I think I had to go anyway, because given my personality, I had seen the entire arc of this story, the creation, the struggling, the we're gonna die, the we get bought and fantastic, and then the oh god, our first hit, and then now we have two teams, one in France, one in America, and it's making two games at the same time. Game of the year again, we got some more awards, etc. And so I was like, okay, what's next? Now I'm feeling a little too comfortable. So some of it, one of the threads was that. One of the thread was, I'm a little, I wouldn't say bored, but I was like, I've seen that now, so how can what's the next level to that? Two, I would admit corporation, the corporate world, as much as it was exciting, the selling, the flying in a private jet for the first time in my life, being able to ask for a couch if I want one in the corner of my room, these kind of things. Those were cool perks. Hey, not that I was flying in private jets or flew.
No, they just put you in one so that you sign the contract when you land on the other side, right? Yeah.
So like I saw all these things,
Yeah.
and then like frankly, having really the support, like huge marketing support. We go to E3 and we feel big, like we feel like wow, everybody's like red carpets and things like that. So I've seen that. I've seen all this. I've been to on this entire arc, and then Game of the Years, etc. And then there's a moment where you go, well, I gotta renew myself. Otherwise, I'll just die there. I'll just become that thing, and so there was a little bit of that, a little bit of the adventurous mind that was being tickled. I was talking about the corporate part. Like the corporate part initially can be even enjoyable, and then little by little, even though they were not like, there's probably worse corporations, but like they, the HR and this and that and the purchase, the way you buy things, the way you got to go through some weird, quirky paths that are annoying, and then suddenly you get you receive some negative answers to things you want to hear yes immediately, and everything is a little more complicated, and eventually it was really worrying me. Third thing, I'll admit it. I think that I was a little at odd with some of the management when the decision of calling Prey, that was very, very hurtful to me. That was I did not want to call this game Prey, and I had to say I wanted to anyway in front of journalists, which is not my type. Yeah, I hate to lie, and those are sales lies. It's not like personal lie or whatever, but it still felt bad. I had to support a message I did not want. I did not like, not only me, but nobody in the team wanted to call this game Prey. Our game had nothing to do with Prey, but it was kind of like Prey anyway, which was felt. And I'm not talking like, yes, I'm grateful that a company would give me the means to make a game and trust my ability with so many millions of dollars. I'm grateful of that. But like there is a bit of the artist, the creative side that is insulted when you tell this artist, your game is going to be called Prey. You go like, I don't think it should. I think it's a mistake. Like, so it's a sales mistake because we're going to get the backfires from
the people who want the Prey made from the start.
These ones are not going to be happy. Then the ones who didn't like Prey, they're not even going to look for our game. Then they're not going to find our game.
Yeah.
So it's a really, really weird thing, and so that was part also. I was like, I gotta go at this point, because I'm not in control of my own boat at this point.
Yeah. And it can, like you said, it's never sort of one thing. It's a number of things, but there are these things. I remember when I left my studio gig when I first got into games, and I was having a great time there. Like I loved working. We were just making third-party licensed product, but I loved it. Design's solving a set of problems within a set of constraints. And you're sometimes whether you're working on a Chuck E. Cheese game or like a Scooby-Doo game or something like that, there's still super interesting problems and super talented people that you work with. But it was something similar that there were some things that I wasn't happy with at the studio, but then the CEO just reached in and made a creative call over the top of me. And it was just, most of the time I could be like, sure, it's your studio, you're the boss or whatever. But that particular day, I think with everything going on, it was just the sort of the cherry on top. And I think that, the name of a game is, we got 2 games in development at the moment at League of Geeks. And one of the games we've had the working title for like over a year, 18 months maybe. And it's been the biggest, most important creative decision, and it's taken us we just recently settled on the new title, but it's taken us so long. It isn't just a marketing decision, the name of the game, right? It filters into everything. So I can totally understand. And especially like your values as a creative, you've run the show, you've never had this sort of, it's just, and then having to go out there and, like you say, tell the sales lie. As we see so many people do, it's got.
And it was also a kick in the face to the original makers of Prey.
That's an interesting way to look at it.
I wanted to
Yeah.
apologize to them many, many times,
Mm.
and I didn't really have a chance because I don't really know these people. But it's not like it never was our intention to steal their IP and make it ours. I was like,
Yeah.
it's gross. I'm very, very. That's not what I wanted to do, and so like everybody lost, and the sales were horrible. By the way, of Prey.
Yeah.
Guess what? It was not a good decision.
Yeah, vindication, Raph. Vindication.
Well, no, because like I wish the sales were amazing, but they were not. It's like I hate to be right in this case, but like I was right in 10 different ways for this name should never have been the name of the game,
Yeah, totally. So now you make the call, you tell the team, hey, you're of legal age, go run the show yourselves. There's $20 for pizza on the fridge. Dad's leaving. Right? Did you have in your mind an idea of what's next, or were you just like, I'm taking a break?
I was tired. I was not even. I didn't even know if I really wanted to make video games anymore.
Yeah. Those days come for sure. Like, and especially after running a studio across transcontinental studio for 18 years, I can imagine.
Yeah, I had done everything I wanted on one hand. On the other hand, I was exhausted and frustrated for a variety of reasons. And I was tired, and I wanted to travel a little bit, make some music, spend some time with my son. And I thought I'm going to just consult on the side.
Yeah, cool.
Yep. And then, consult with one person, you consult with someone else. And then eventually I consulted with Julien Roby, my former producer, who was my intern during Arx.
Yeah.
And he was the executive producer of Dishonored. And it was it. It was the itch was there again, but like this time I wanted it different. I wanted to stay independent for real, and make games that are cheaper.
Yeah.
And we didn't want to go for the,
the big
numbers. Yeah. So because, the more money you have to make a game, the more budget you have, the more you never make real decisions. Everything has got so much pressure, and there's tons of momentum in any little decisions. And in fact, it's hard to make. If you want to go deep on some like systems or whatever, then the more you have a heavy art production in your way, and like a heavy path of production in general, not just art, but everything, like you want the slightest feature, you got to go through like a programmer producer that is going to make a plan for the next 2 years or something. We wanted to go back to having something a little more like, small team of buddies that do this thing, and so we frankly, when we started, we thought we were going to do really much. We did not think Word West would be as big. It did not have a name at first, etc. And we thought it's going to be a small thing, And now the reality is that we had to recalibrate because we don't really know how to do small, like to do tiny things.
Isn't that interesting, right? Like it's hard to actually do small when you come. We had the same thing, and we weren't even making games anywhere near the same size as you. We tried to make a little a card game in 6 weeks for mobile, and 4 years later we're shipping this thing.
Exactly, it's so hard because I think you have we have our habits and. We are our own enemies, It's like every time we do a feature, it's like, come on, we just push it a little more. Can we add some physics to this, etc. And then like, and then the next thing you know, you're like almost, you're way more high def than you thought you would be, etc., etc.
Yeah.
But we didn't even think we'd be 3D at first, So that's how unrealistic we were about ourselves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so so WolfEye now, like you are about 20 people, or are you, and you're distributed around the world as well, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, amazing. And so, when you joined, how many were there? Like it was really early days, like when you and Julien spoke?
Yeah, it was mostly like talking, planning, making documentation, trying to find fundings, etc., etc.
Yeah, great.
There were. And it's only later when we started to really have a plan that then
Okay.
to grow, because we did not have money anyway. So
Yeah, right. So let's now that we're about to get into WolfEye and Weird West, why don't we take a beat, and I'm sure you've given the pitch a bunch of times. Give our listeners just the high level explanation of what Weird West is.
So Weird West is a game set in a fantasy version of the West. So it's an imaginary world where you have you're going to play 5 different characters, and at some point you realize how their stories are intertwined and how it all makes sense. It's a very rich system game, so you can pretty much play the way you want and grow your characters in different ways, and it's heavy on the simulation, so different players will have different experiences, basically. That's pretty much what I can say.
Yeah, it's a fantastic game. It is exactly what you've mentioned, and there's your vision of the West is quite alluring as well, and it's quite dark at times too. It's you find yourself in quite a dark place. Some of the quests you're like, oof, okay, there's some really hectic stuff going on here. It's quite the ride, and it's really interesting as well to see Raph, you and your team's stamp, like your history and your sort of the type of games that you make as well is stamped all over it, but from an entirely different viewpoint, and it's quite interesting and wonderful to see it there. So let's start there. Like you said, you thought it was going to be 2D at first. When did it go 3D? Did you know that you wanted the sort of the top down viewport from the start? What was the inspirations for that? Was that a scope decision? Was it creative?
Yeah, I think the entire world was against us, even ourselves. We wanted to do 2D. We were determined to do 2D, maybe pixel arty kind of thing, and then when we started to pay independent artists to just make some mock-ups, etc. And we had something that was pretty, frankly, and we started to show to the publishers, and the publishers would be like, why don't you just do it in first person, etc., etc. I just told you why.
Yeah.
We had a lot of that happening.
Yeah, and they want their Dishonored. That's what's happening there, I'm sure.
Yeah, and then we had our first artists coming and helping, and he himself wanted he could tell and then as soon as we unleashed him, I said, all right, let's see. And then we started to have characters, and all of us were like, yeah,
it's got to be.
And then hey, can you move that camera? That'll be oh cool, yeah. And then it's that's how it happens. It's it's 1 inch at a time kind of thing where you and yeah.
It's really interesting.
We don't even know how to do 2D games, frankly, when we go to animations, for example, we know a pipeline that works with Maya and all of that, and then if you buy Unreal, then you know how it's going to work.
Yeah.
Otherwise, if you're going to do 2 things in 2D now, it's it's a different type of animators that you need. It's a different type of thinking and all.
It's
all
a different
around.
craft, right? It's the base principles of animation may be the same, but that's after that it goes technically, production wise. But your game does have a lot of very, very very attractive and aesthetic 2D elements as well, like the map, and there is, and the menus and the cutscenes and.
For the good and the bad, I think a lot of it, there's legacy in there, and in some ways it brought us a style, and in some ways it hurt us. The game probably lacks polish because we started with statements such as, we don't care about pops, but that was a true statement when we had a game where you would have a little character that would suddenly be sitting on a chair and then standing up and then taking an object, and the object would teleport in the position, etc. So that's fine, that pops and and things like that, because we're going to go deeper into the systems, etc. And eventually that was not enough. So we had all these pops everywhere, looked bad. So a lot of the problems, even in the final game, are a result of a lot of legacy and decisions we had made, which were with frankly a tiny budget at first. When we started this thing, we thought we would make the game with a fourth of what it ended up costing. And hey, we still learn, of course. Next time, at least we know what we're doing from the get-go.
Yeah, that's it. And it's a form like the game. It's structure. So there are 5 heroes, as you mentioned, or characters. Let's say that because some of them are certainly anti-heroes. I would say throughout this wonderfully weird West that you're intertwining your experience through, and the story is weaving through, and you're very like I mentioned to you before the call, Raph. It's got its hooks into me for sure. I'm onto the third hero now, deep in the third hero, and just like I can feel it pulling me towards something. And there's even been some great reveals, and there's some really interesting elements and mechanics that play into each other quite nicely by having these the different characters. Like the first moment I went back and got Jane Bell and brought her into my posse, and how that it worked really well, even just on a mechanical level for me as the player, with getting all my gear back and all this sort of stuff, and then having an additional character who's quite powerful. It was really quite a profound moment. When did that core idea of having these multiple characters and this sort of frame narrative that brings them all together come about?
It's like when you have a pillar in the middle of your living room and you go like, what are we going to do with this thing? And, everybody says it's ugly, you should not be there. Yeah, I know it's in the way. I know I can see the sky. But somehow you end up making a good thing with it, right? So it's about exactly what happened to us. The concept used to be so different. We started with some sort of a roguelike kind of idea where we were gonna, every time you would start a new game, you would play a different character with a different backstory.
Interesting. Yep.
And it would be a run, and the idea was it would be a game without any side quest, without any main quest. Because I've always in any RPG, the quests I prefer are the side quests. I don't care so much for the main quest. So I sort of like, how about we do a game with just main quests? It was just side quests. It keep going. Yep. And then if you die, you die, and then you start another character, and this time you're a butcher, and you're in this town where there are pigments in the vicinity, that whatever. And so we started to do that game. So it was relying on a lot of procedural, too much, because procedural is a hard beast to conquer. We really thought we were going to do it, and then we as many, we broke our teeth on that. And so at some point we decided, all right, and that was like late into the game. We're like, all right, let's revert to what we know how to do. And what we know how to do is crafting stuff. And so we did not have much time left, but we crafted, and so that's why we had 5 characters, because we had so much this idea that you would end with one character and go to the next, etc. So like, well, instead of 5 random characters, it's going to be 5 fixed characters, and then we have to make a story with this, which that kind of made a story around that idea of like, why would you have 5 characters, etc. And it worked out. I mean, I won't spoil it for you, but I think it's a pretty cool story. And but that's the story. But it's funny because I've heard that kind of thing happen in many games. Like BioShock had a similar story where the story was one way, and then like a few months before it shipped, it went another way because they were stuck like with their current and again, by using whatever constraint you have, then you end up making something cool and unpredicted, specifically because if there was no pillar in the center of my living room, I would have never come with this great idea of how to use the pillar.
Yeah.
So I think it's a lot of legacies. That's how the 5 stories thing came about.
So it's an interesting thing that you were mentioning before about some of the elements of the game that you feel didn't come together, or you didn't have enough time, or didn't really hit that execution on your vision that you were looking for. What are the things that you do feel really, really came through, that you sat down at the start and you and Julien said, hey, we're gonna build this studio, we're going to do this thing, and this is the sort of game, or this is what we want to do. And then you can stand back today and look at it and be like, hey, on to the next thing. But that one, we did that. We, that really came through. We were right about that thing.
I mean, I think there was a big gamble on can an immersive sim be ISO?
Yeah.
That was one of that, and it was more like of an intellectual debate than a really meaningful, life-changing debate, frankly. But can the Arcane spirit, because we have a fair amount of Arcane people in this company,
mm-hmm.
can it survive after Arcane in a different kind of format? And I think it did. I think people that are fan of the genre, they will they might have their grief with the game in some ways, but they will admit that there is so the immersive sim part is pretty well received. And so that was the big bet that I'm glad we pulled off somehow. So now we have a pretty solid basis of systems, and as far as the procedural, which was also another big pillar of ours, that was a hard nut to crack, and we didn't even crack it, frankly. But it did help us. It did help us because we had never done anything procedural at Arcane. We always relied on handcrafting everything, but we found some story event. We found some ways for the procedural part to dynamically change your story at another level than physics or stuff like that. For us, simulation was always around how characters respond in the moment around something, or they're being on patrols. The physics spawning a noise. So it's all the sandboxy nature of the game. Yeah. But we've never really pushed that to the level of, and what if you hurt a specific person, then a specific person comes back to you later at a point that, vendetta kind of thing.
Yeah, I remember when that happened the first time. It was like vendetta, kill their boss leader, and I saw this person running off the map. I was like, no, that's no, I don't want that. No, and it's a beautiful moment in the game where you're like, oh, these people they're gonna, and they do. They come back at the worst possible moments.
Yeah, so it's almost like it's a kind of like a system version of a story almost. It's like when the systems start to create stories, and then, those stories are not extremely deep. It's not like this person is going to remember exactly what you did, and then like now you have a chance to redeem yourself, and now it's become your friend, and then this and that and that, and it interlaces in meaningful ways with the rest of the story. But from a player's perspective, it made their story a little different. And it's more honorable. It's more like, in my story, this person I saved did this for me or whatever, which is, it's the same with the Friends for Life. So if you save the nun somewhere, and then you have this nun with a shotgun that shows up and start to save you from a ridgeback attack or something, and it's kind of like a cool, unique moment that belongs to you. So that is something we're taking with us for the next game, because it's, and we can probably go a little next level again, So, there's a lot of learning at every time we make a game. We learn something, and so that's pretty much what we've learned.
So, what about the things now that you're like you said, procedural didn't crack that? Is it something that you have your eyes on cracking for the next thing and a little bit more, but maybe more measured? What are those things that? Now that because we always have, I think on every project, that naivety that we're talking about, because our ambitions exceed our understanding of, what we want to take on next, whether it be, moving from Dishonored to Prey, or, starting Arx Fatalis with Arcane, or whether it's even, Weird West. What are the things that, you feel in this game you didn't really hit the mark on, and you're either leaving behind or you want to have another crack at in the next game?
Yeah, I think one that is fascinating is the combat and aiming system of our game. We've had some people that have no problem with it, and if they have no problem with it, usually they love it, because it's a very direct, actiony, sandboxy combat. It's all like dynamic, and there are physics involved, and you shoot on this thing and that happen, and you can shoot on anything you want, not just like enemies, but also objects. And it accounts for verticality. If like you want to shoot at a barrel that contains some oil that is like up there above the head of a character, you can, even though it's almost like it's a game that you look in ISO. So we support all that.
Yeah, and it's quite impressive actually.
Right, there's a lot of work for it, and so for some people, it's just like they take the joypad and it's like, yep, it's intuitive, etc. They got it. It took a long, many months of figuring out the system. And for some people, maybe a third of the people, which is huge. A third of the people means that you're gonna have a third of people that's screaming on Twitter. For a third of the people, they just don't get it. Like it doesn't click. They don't connect with the system, and we still to this day we think we know what it is, but like still like we're a little puzzled about it. But like there's a mix of when you are in aim mode, you can't rotate the camera, so you have to de-aim before you can rotate. So there's a little bit of clunkiness that is imposed on the player there. There's a bit of it also that is inherited from twin stick shooters mechanic. So there's some players that don't play twin stick shooters. So for them, it's exactly, the first time you took a joypad to play a first person shooter game.
Yeah, I was thinking the exact same example. Yeah. Whoa, hey. Yeah,
exactly.
Same
so for
thing,
them,
right?
They're at that level, and so our game is extremely brutal for them. It's like, okay, I can't play this game. I got chewed by two coyotes. And maybe, so I don't know, whatever. So so we've taken a lot of heat on that specifically. So this is definitely something for the next game that we are trying to hit the nail, in the way that it won't come out again. Even right now, actually, we are, we've done, since the game shipped, I don't know, I mean, I assume if you've played recently, I assume you've had the latest patches, and those patches are like helping the aim assist. They're also like slowing down the game during combat a little bit, and there's different options for that. And now there's going to be another patch again, which with a different mode, which is always kind of like behind the character, so some sort of like not quite third person.
Got you, but like lock that orientation, so it's a little bit clearer. Yeah.
So, and you won't have to worry about toggling into rotate the camera mode, because the camera is always where you aim anyway.
Interesting.
So hopefully we'll fix that problem a little late, but hopefully we will.
There's that actually segues into a question that I had for you, which is not specifically about the top-down camera, but it's more so, but it does have to do with accessibility and challenge and within it, and how that relates to an immersive sim and your experience and how you approach these things. Because obviously within an immersive sim, so much of it is the player has so much agency, right? They have so much intentionality that they can exert over the game space and over the other actors within that game space. So, that there's a natural amount of accessibility there. And I mean, you lean right into it with Weird West, like the save scumming, right? It's like you can quick save, but before everything, that's absolutely like a part of the immersive sim experience. But what is it that you find are the most important things when you approach these games, through your time on all of these licenses and titles? How do you go about actually balancing challenge and accessibility? How much of it do you get for free due to the nature of the genre, and how much of it is there are some tried and true tricks or gotchas that are there?
Yeah, I don't think we're really good at it. I think it's a very empiric model where we just test the game as much as possible. And frankly, these kind of games are hard to test the traditional way with a limited amount of QA. For the next game,
they're so vast mechanically, right? Like, and the possibilities.
So vast. Yeah, exactly. That there's always going to be an exploit. There's always going to be. So then, what are you going to do? You're going to make your game much harder because of like the 1% people that find this exploit. It's a difficult problem, and so we for the next game, we're definitely considering early access. Not because we want to sell the game early. That's not because
Yeah, no, that's a bonus. Yeah, no, I know exactly what you mean. It's a fantastic program. Armello wouldn't be anything like it is today without, the community diving in and helping us. And sometimes they wouldn't even, it's not like they suggest the fix to things or they call it out, but they point at things and you can sometimes triangulate like, oh, they have an issue with that, but we could do this to this system. And it's a really great platform.
And I think for some people, for some of them who want to could come closer to, that's something I would have loved that if it had existed when I was in my 20s. Because I think some people want to get closer to the game dev world and be part of something and learn, in context of a game that is being in development and interact with the devs, etc. And I think that's great for everybody. And I think there's a little more buy-in from the players and it creates a community. It's just a good thing. So we're considering this for our next game. But to your question, other than testing and fixing as we see things, there's not much we can do.
Yeah, that's it. Just throw down the options within the world and the mechanics, and throw a random variable in there we all call the player, and see how they break things.
Those games, there's a fair amount of the players are going to be a little responsible for their own experience in some ways, because we can only control. I mean, that's the point of this kind of games, is that we don't control. It's all about embracing the crazy stuff that can happen. So some of the systems, they will be inherently a little fragile, and sometimes for the better. That's also what create those crazy exploits and abuse of the systems that lead to funny moments or to empowering moments, and that are so valuable to players. But I think the only way to have both the good without the bad of those games is tons and tons and tons and tons of testing. Because we can fix things. It just takes time. It takes time. And it takes identifying them.
Well, that's a beautiful transition into more so the team and the development process, and day to day, and I think I'm keen to as well hear about your relationship with Devolver in a bit and how they came into the picture. But I mean, as we mentioned, you're distributed. You don't have an office or a studio anywhere? You're all fully distributed, and where are you dotted around the world, or is it again? Have you got Austin in France or?
Yeah, the big bulk is in Austin and in Lyon, but we also have in Australia, we have in Canada, LA, Paris.
Wow.
I already said France, but no, I said Lyon. So France Paris is another place of France.
And how did you find that? I mean, you've worked with, intercontinentally, like with your teams before and with a remote team, but this, now having the entire team remotely, how was that for you and the crew? I mean, we also went through a global pandemic while you were shipping this game and everything, so a lot of us were doing the same thing.
Exactly. So I think you just answered. People used to ask me this before. And I was trying to explain what it is, and the kind of discipline you need, and the tools and the Zooms and all, Discord or whatever it is that you can use. But now it's like everybody understands it. I'm pretty sure. It's like we've all gone through that at any whichever company we were working for. We had to deal with this. So it's been hard. I don't think it was hard before COVID. COVID made it hard because the difference between working the way we wanted to and we were before COVID and then working under COVID was that every 3 or 4 months we would meet the entire team in person.
Yeah, right. Okay.
For an we call it the WolfCon.
That's awesome. Yeah.
The WolfEye Con. And that was very bonding. That was the human part that is so necessary to a team.
Yes.
Whereas we spent 2 or 3 years without seeing each other, and we're finally going to have, in September, we're going to have another WolfCon.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
What do you do at the WolfCon? Because it's interesting. I know that the Unknown Worlds crew, famous for Subnautica and things, they do this. They have their retreat. I think it's might be twice a year or something like that. And they do like mini presentations and things. And then it's obviously just the chill out.
Yeah. We do I mean, we're going to bring a set of questions and topics that we want to discuss for the next game and how we're going to do it. And so, yeah, it's very much like the cool thing is that we prepare all these meetings in advance, and then it's very efficient, and everybody's involved. So there's a nice feeling of camaraderie. Camaraderie, yeah. It's a French word that
you should be an expert on that one.
With my French accent, so it's super normal.
I love it. I can help you if you have any issue with the French words. I'll help.
I appreciate it.
Yeah. All right. Cool. Yeah, because we're doing something similar actually. Next week we're flying a bunch of the team, and I always find it fascinating because you're right. That human element is so important. For those of us who are still working in distributed models, and it's something that every team that I'd spoken to who was doing it before the global pandemic was doing that. We're getting together, having that human element, because it can be when you're just logging into Zooms to talk about a problem, and then they don't see you whistling on the way to the bathroom, or like sitting down at lunch talking about what's the latest show you're watching, or hearing about what you and your partner did on the weekend. It's definitely added pressure on the game dev conversation sometimes.
Well, there's going to be something biological too, I mean, I know it's a totally different podcast here, but I'm sure when you have two people physically in the same space, there's more that goes through than through a screen.
Absolutely. All those subtle tells in body language and other things. And absolutely. I completely agree. All right. So your partner's coming into launch and everything. Devolver. I mean, Weird West is such an interesting, but also at the same time, such a natural fit. Like Devolver are one of these publishers that have curated their portfolio from day one, that now people talk about a Devolver game, like before it's even signed to them, like people can be like, oh, that looks like a Devolver game. And
that's true,
Weird West, it funnily, it fits into that category too, where the two parties, WolfEye and Devolver, seem so natural for each other. So I'm really interested, especially with your experience, doing deals like, signing ones like on the eve of your Armageddon or your pending Armageddon for the studio, and saving things, and then, selling off like a big acquisition to Bethesda and going through all of that corporate side of things. Stepping from that then into your indie studio and signing a pub deal. And how did that come about? When did they come into the process?
They came a little earlier than we were expecting. We had planned to work on our own for as long as possible until the game would be fully defined. So, and then we would tour the publishers. But instead, they're in Austin, and they have friends. So it was a very casual talk that we had, and which quickly turned into a business position.
They had the home ground advantage, so to speak.
Yeah, they were. Why wait? We can work now. It's we trust you guys. Let's do it. And so that's what we did. We thought like, well, I've always liked them. We never worked with them, but we knew of them, and they were friends. As I said, like, I've been having dinners with Harry a few times in my life before working with him as a local industry friend, without any. There was no hope of working together or
just
like
hanging out.
It was just hanging out. It was just like, so I knew the person as a hanging out buddy, and they were great. They were great to work with. They are very fair to developers. They're very developer friendly. I mean, I'm sure everybody says that. Anyone who worked with them, they're just a bunch of really clever, fun people to, they're small as well. The decisions are fast. They always make sense. When you don't understand a decision, you can ask to whoever made it, and you immediately understand why, and then you can change. They're flexible as well. They're really, really great people. And they've always been this kind of like little pirate ship in the world of publishers, who do crazy things such as renting the parking lot in front of you, saying like, "Hey guys,
I love it.
I love it. I love it. Like, how can we be more efficient than the others in PR and cheaper? And then, only them know how to do that. So, and that's, yeah. So, yeah, I love these guys.
Yeah, they're a great crew. It's also interesting as well to, well, not interesting, that's the wrong word. It's also, it's important at this point to point out that you don't become a devolver and as successful with independent developers if you are treating them like crap, right? Like, it's clear that they have fantastic relationships with all of their developers. Like, I mean, I could say that because I very personally know a lot of the developers, obviously, that they're working with, and then know the Devolver crew too. But it's, we independent developers, as you know, talk, and to hear about the great ways in which, Devolver are working with them. I mean, Julian from Massive Monster here in Melbourne, they were coming in on the launch of Cult of the Lamb, which looks really, really cool. And he's saying the other day, I'm like, how are you going with Devolver? And he's just like, yeah, they're awesome. I just got a producer that, checks in. He's like, are you on track? How's it going? Can we help? And he's like, it keeps me honest. It's good. It's really great to know that there are those pubs out there that, you can have them in your corner in that way. Did they help much with the creative side of things or anything? Again, I'm always interested in this. It's a question I ask because there are some publishers, like I know Annapurna, it almost in some ways can be like a creative mentorship. And, they have a lot of insight and a lot of, but other publishers just like to let you do your thing. And
not at all. Yeah. I mean, again, it's never, they don't bring any unsolicited, and we're also like, we're open to feedback. It's not like we go to meetings and say, hey guys, we absolutely do anything,
Yeah.
Cannot have any idea. We're not
keep
like
it to
that.
yourselves. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, frankly, until the game gets tested, we never exactly, we don't know for sure where we're going. So having some form of feedback is good. What we don't want is getting orders, obviously. And even Bethesda was not doing that. Everybody has been very, very respectful of us for this past years. So, and Devolver is exactly the same. Like their opinion, if you ask them, they will, they say, hey, I play, they have questions or whatever, but it's always very, very soft, very, we can read between the lines. We can see when people are worried about something, but it's always been very respectful.
So, this isn't the kind of podcast where we try and get the hot scoops on like, the next games or anything like that. So, speak as candidly or as reserved as you want. I'm not trying to figure out what the next thing is, but what is the next thing for you and Weird West in regards to, like, are you moving on to a new game? Do you've got your WolfCon coming up? You've done the thing, you've been here before, just looking back just over your shoulder at the last thing, you've got a patch coming out. What does the next few years look like for WolfEye Games?
Yeah, so there's been a lot of patching and updating the game and collecting data, not personal data. We're not doing that. Don't worry about it.
Of all the players who complained about the control scheme, right?
That's what it's like. Really trying to understand what we did right, what we did wrong, and how can we, make this game better. We still have some updates that are to come. So, and two, how it affects what we do next.
Yep.
So that's pretty much where we are. So to answer your question a little more precisely, we don't have like an exact, it's not like we have greenlit a concept internally and we say like, that's what we're working on. We are, we're maximizing what we can do right now with Weird West.
Yeah,
and
clever.
In the meantime, we're thinking of a variety of things.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, you got it out there. Exploit always sounds like a dirty word, but when we're running our own studios, when we've got an IP that we've just put out there, there's so many ways in which you can take that experience and all the time that you've put into something, and then leverage it into more opportunities, even if that's cash. That will assist you in making your next thing. Absolutely. So I'm going to go all the way back to something that you mentioned earlier on to sort of wrap up the podcast. Raph, you mentioned that you wanted to play some music when you were, on your break. Like you're a musician. Has it been something, just like that you've tinkered around with? Was it as a young kid in the background, or was this something that you picked up after, later in life as something to take your, I think sometimes we're so absorbed in the game, it's like, all right, well, I'm going to take up pottery so I can do something entirely, have my own little creative outlet outside of this. How did it come about?
No, music has always been my mistress. As a kid, I was playing video games. I was playing Dungeons and Dragons, but also was playing music in a band. And then later on, I dropped music for a while because I think there's something when you work in an environment that is so sharp, specifically in media and in artistry, then you see what real musicians look like. And it's kind of discouraging. So from age 25 to 35, I was like not even touching my guitars and my bass or whatever.
Yeah. Wow.
And then eventually I started again. I was like, okay, I got to do that again. So I started again, and in fact, I made a couple of musics that ended up in Dishonored, Prey.
Oh, great.
Yeah, and then started a band with a person that is called Eva Gore, and she and I are making also some of the musics that, in fact, our first song that was in a game as a band was in Moon Crash, the Prey extension.
Right.
In there, that is ours as a band, and then in Weird West there are 5 songs that are ours in there. So,
awesome.
In fact, you said you were playing the Lost Fire Nation.
Yep.
So I don't know how far you are, but there is there's one of our songs in there.
I'll have to keep my ears open for it.
And the credit score is ours as well. But so it's been a side passion, which is becoming really, really an important thing in my life now. We signed a label. We're going to play in Germany in January. We actually have a mini tour in Germany and some other countries nearby in Europe. So Weird Wolves we're called, and
I love it. Oh, that mic drop, the name at the end, that's fantastic. Well, congrats, Raph. That sounds amazing. Congrats, all your success throughout your career. It's really, I'm so pleased that we ran through all of that. It's such a fascinating tale. For anyone else, who's interested, there's actually a really great no-clip documentary on Arcane Studios. Storied history as well. So, check that out. It'll be quite easy to find on YouTube as well. Raph, thank you so much. Really, really excited to see what's next for, WolfEye Games and what how you build upon, what you've done with the immersive sim and your studio. And it's been a pleasure talking to you, mate. Have a great day.
Thank you very much. And congratulations as well to you. And thanks for the very fun conversation.
Of course.